Hello, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor and pleasure to participate in this conference. I will speak about Čiurlionis and Philosophy on the philosophical meanings of his creative work. Mikalojus Konstantinas Čiurlionis is usually regarded as the most talented of all Lithuanian artists and the only one true Lithuanian genius. We think of him as a creator whose musical talent is perfectly matched by his talent in the sphere of visual arts. Yet even now, after much research, Čiurlionis still remains an enigmatic and underappreciated creator. Apart from painting and music, there are more sides to Čiurlionis' genius. One of those unappreciated sides is a philosophical side. Though Čiurlionis cannot be regarded as a professional philosopher in a narrow sense, the philosophical depth of his creation far surpasses the depth of philosophical intuitions found in the writings of the majority of professional philosophers. Therefore, one might ask a question: in what sense Čiurlionis might be viewed as a philosopher? Trying to answer this question, we should inquire about the philosophical potential that might be discovered in his painting and music. There are two ways of revealing the philosophical potential of Čiurlionis' creation. The first way should be based on the analysis of Čiurlionis' extant writings. That is, Čiurlionis' philosophy as expressed in the medium of language, the usual and most important medium of philosophical thinking. While the second one should take into consideration the whole of Čiurlionis' creation, especially focusing on non-linguistic modes of philosophical thought, such as painting and music. Čiurlionis' extant writings reveal both his literary talent and potential for philosophical thinking. Yet, in this presentation, I will leave aside Čiurlionis' philosophical views as indirectly expressed in the usual medium of language, and rather focus on those philosophical aspects of his creation that might be revealed in his painting and music. Despite the fact that this implicit potential for philosophical thought that we find in his painting and music was never explicitly expressed by Čiurlionis himself in his own writings, this implicit potential nevertheless provides a clear testimony to the deep philosophical nature of Čiurlionis' creative genius. In this presentation, I will focus on Čiurlionis as a thinker in the medium of color and sound. The first philosophical aspect of Čiurlionis' art is related to his unique ability to communicate a certain hidden message, or show an invisible mental landscape behind concrete imagery of his paintings. Usual visible images and concrete landscapes depicted in his paintings point to invisible landscapes of thought, or even something invisible that is very similar to Platonic forms. Čiurlionis' paintings have the ability to transfer our attention or focus of viewing from something visible to something invisible, or from something concrete to something abstract. In this respect, his paintings function as activators of cognitive processes very similar to Platonic anamnesis. Therefore, one might say that Čiurlionis' creation has a certain Platonic aspect to it, or to put it more radically, that Čiurlionis himself is like some kind of Lithuanian Plato, working in the medium of color and sound. In this sense, in the sense that Čiurlionis abstracts from concrete visual images a certain invisible image and transfers it to some deeper level behind the visible plane of a painting, where it is recovered by a viewer as a hidden intuition, mood, or abstracted thought, he might be viewed as a true pioneer of abstract painting. Though he is not an abstractionist in the conventional sense, Čiurlionis should be considered the first true abstract painter in the aforementioned sense, that is, in the sense of a dynamic or processual abstraction involving the transition from the visible imagery found on the surface of paintings to the invisible imagery revealed on some deeper plane. The second philosophical aspect is related to the fractal dialectic of parts and wholes. This dialectic is found both in Čiurlionis' paintings and his musical compositions. In Čiurlionis' creation, there are such spatial and temporal parts that reveal themselves as not only parts, but also as wholes. And vice versa, there are also such spatial and temporal wholes which appear as not only wholes, but also as parts of certain even larger wholes. Such fractal dialectic of parts and wholes is imbued with a deep philosophical meaning, for it expresses the logic of the formation of a philosophical worldview. It is an expression of the idea that even with insufficient empirical data and without any complete and final scientific knowledge, one should try to arrive at some complete and all-encompassing philosophical worldview, thus, so to speak, recovering the whole from any of its parts. The dialectic of parts and wholes also communicates the idea that our knowledge is both partial and complete, and both absolute and relative. This idea might also be interpreted in ontological, cosmological, theological, and anthropological terms. Any part of the cosmos, including humans themselves, might be viewed as some smaller yet somehow and somewhat complete microcosmic versions of the whole cosmos. In Čiurlionis' musical compositions, this fractal dialectic is expressed employing the specific resources of musical language in terms of both harmony and melody, while in his paintings it is expressed, though both spatially, on the level of each particular piece of painting, and temporally, on the level of sequential arrangement of a group of paintings. The third philosophical aspect is related to Čiurlionis' ability to integrate in any single piece of artistic work various perspectives, perceptual and intellectual sources of information, levels of experience, existential moods, as well as different modes of artistic expression. This ability to integrate different strata of perception and intuition resulted in a unique way of expression that might be called synesthetic in the broadest possible sense. The deeper philosophical meaning behind the synesthetic character of Čiurlionis' art is related to the idea that any true philosophical experience should involve not only human mind, but also his or her soul and body, that is, the whole of a human being. In other words, any deep and true philosophical thought should be multifaceted in various ways and, in a figurative sense, resemble a solid, three-dimensional or even multidimensional body. In this regard, Čiurlionis anticipates phenomenology. The fourth philosophical aspect is related to Čiurlionis' ability to create in his paintings and musical compositions alternative imaginary worlds. He reveals himself as a true, even prophetic visionary. This ability to conceive alternative versions of reality has not only artistic value, but also a deep philosophical meaning, for the purpose of philosophy is not only to conceive the world, especially the living world of human beings as it is, but also to imagine its alternative, other and better versions. In his creation, Čiurlionis reveals himself as a demiurge of alternative worlds, that is, in a sense, of philosophical utopias, indirectly expressed in non-linguistic medium. We might arrive at a conclusion that it is possible not only to interpret Čiurlionis' creation from some philosophical perspective, but also to view his art as a powerful source of inspiration for philosophers themselves. On the other hand, a glimpse of Čiurlionis' art through the lens of philosophy might provide us with a better understanding of his painting and music, and as a consequence, with a better appreciation of Čiurlionis' creative genius in general. So now I've set the stage, and now I'll go to variations on those proposed themes. As you know, philosophy is about wonder. Aristotle expressed a very deep idea, very deep thought, that the source of philosophy is wonder. And in the context of Lithuanian art and the entire Lithuanian culture, Čiurlionis is the most wonderful artist. As a creator, he was wondering, inquiring into the world. He was curious in an Aristotelian sense. Let us remember his cycle of paintings, The Journey of a Prince. And therefore, he as a figure, as an artist, as a creator, is the embodiment of philosophical wonder. It is a very deep connection between the phenomenon of philosophy and the phenomenon of Čiurlionis' creation. And the other very important aspect is related to the fact that philosophy has no object of its own, as an object of inquiry. Various disciplines focus on their own subject matter or their own object. Philosophy has no such an object, or the whole reality, the whole world is its object. And in this sense, if we try to arrive at some relation between Čiurlionis and philosophy, we might say that we should inquire into the whole of Čiurlionis' creation. It is very important to investigate various domains of his creation, various interesting and peculiar facts and various influences, but influences cannot do justice to such a genius as philosophy. He is more a source of influences to others than is a confluence of those influences as streams. He is a mighty river like Amazon, and in this sense he nourishes other artists and he influences those other artists, but he cannot be reduced to influences himself. Therefore, any reference to particular ideologies, religions, or even theosophy cannot do justice to Čiurlionis. He uses those elements from various symbolic realms, from various symbolic domains and religions and ideologies and theosophy, but he transforms them according to his own vision. Therefore, we should look after, inquire into his own source of creative power. And philosophy is very good at this. Philosophy tries to look holistically, and as I mentioned, the only true object of philosophy is the whole reality, the whole world, not any particular phenomena or objects within the world, but the world itself. And in this sense, if we liken Čiurlionis to philosophy, he should also be understood in a holistic manner, in a holistic way. Various scientific disciplines investigate their own concrete problems, and they solve particular problems. But philosophy has no such a problem. The problem of philosophy is the whole reality, the whole world. And the Greek word problem means something thrown in front of oneself, something posited in front of oneself, pro and balo. And when we speak about solving the problems, we have in mind the dissolution, the disintegration, annihilation of what is in front of us. And philosophy cannot proceed in this way. Philosophy is not, has no intention to destroy the world. And in this sense, philosophy should understand the phenomenon of Čiurlionis in this holistic manner, not destroying or not reducing his creation to particular fragments, or reducing his creative phenomenon into particular influences. And philosophy has as its object and as its problem the whole of reality, and Čiurlionis as a creative phenomenon is also a very interesting, a very peculiar world in itself. So as philosophy proceeds to inquire into the world, and as he or she tries to understand the world holistically, so in the same manner he or she should try to understand the phenomenon of Čiurlionis holistically. For philosophers, it is very interesting to view Čiurlionis's music and painting as a lens through which we observe the whole of reality. He is, in some respect, is the object of our philosophical observation and philosophical thought, but the whole of Čiurlionis' art is a lens through which we look at the world. He discovers the world for himself, and he discloses the world for us. As Professor Landsbergis in his introductory word said yesterday, we should look at ourselves through the eyes of Čiurlionis, as earlier in my course on Čiurlionis, in a cycle of lectures, also expressed the idea that we should look into the world through the lens of Čiurlionis' art. The investigation of Čiurlionis' legacy is one thing, but quite another thing, and even more important thing, is to look at the whole of reality through the eyes of Čiurlionis. Čiurlionis is the most shining, the most luminous phenomenon of Lithuanian culture. And phenomenon is something which shines. The Greek word phenomenon is from the root phan, as in photography, phos, photos, or phos, the more archaic form of this root, something which shines forth. But the most important thing is that the world as a whole shines through particular phenomena which appear to us. And in this sense, if we look at Čiurlionis' creation as some smaller version of reality, as a world in itself, various paintings, various musical compositions, what is depicted in those paintings are the phenomena which shine, but it is more precise to say that Čiurlionis as a genius, the world of Čiurlionis' creation shines through those particular phenomena in the sphere, in the context of painting, of music, and so on. And in even a more deeper sense, the world that we discover through the eyes of Čiurlionis shines through those particular phenomena that are presented in his creative legacy. In those phenomena that comprise various themes, various objects, everything in the sphere of sound and color and even writing and so on. So in this respect, philosophers have much more to say about Čiurlionis than do musicologists and art historians. They have their own work to do. They have something important to say about the genius of Čiurlionis. It is very important to say that Čiurlionis is often analyzed in terms of various opposites, various opposing influences or various binary structures or opposites belonging to various binary structures. And it is important to observe that Čiurlionis resolves and reduces those opposites into some unity. And this unity of his creation shines even through those opposites, which are reconcilable. For example, the fractal dialectic, which I referred to somewhat earlier, is very important to show that every part of his creation is, in a sense, a whole, but on the other hand, even the whole is only a part. We often try to achieve a closure in our investigation of Čiurlionis. So we often want to arrive at a definitive, final version of research achievement and so on, and we edit various tomes entitled Complete Čiurlionis, Various Čiurlionis, and Complete Bibliography, or Complete Letters, or final interpretation or set interpretations and so on. We often try to achieve some sort of closure, and it is a very, very great mistake to do such thing, because in a sense every interpretation in terms of fractal dialectic is complete, but it is only a part, and even the whole of our understanding, of our recent understanding, is but a part of what Čiurlionis proposes us, and he is much larger, much bigger than any of those interpretations, and therefore we should reconcile ourselves with the idea that we will never reach a definitive, the final understanding of Čiurlionis. He will always remain a mystery, and it's a good thing that he will remain such a mystery. Another very important thing that I want to say is about various symbols in Čiurlionis' art, and we encounter various symbols, various enigmatic figures from religions, prophets, angels, and even the representations of God, and so on. But those symbols should not be understood literally as illustrations or simple stylizations of various symbolic realms and symbolic contexts. Each symbol in Čiurlionis' creation has its traditional part and an authorial part, Čiurlionis' authorial part. It expresses something in the context of a concrete particular religion, but it also refers to something in the context of Čiurlionis' own thinking, in the context of his own imagination. For example, the representations of Egyptian pyramids or Mesopotamian ziggurats or Jewish altars. Of course, they have as an element this traditional symbolic element, but both pyramids and ziggurats and altars also have an added authorial value, and this circumstance, this fact, abolishes the legitimacy and the economy of interpretation, of interpreting Čiurlionis only and simply in the context of any particular religion or ideology or or symbolic realm. And I'd like to turn your attention to the fact that the Greek word symbolon, which derives from the prefix sun, which means with, and another root, balo, which, as in problem, which means to throw, is something put together, something thrown together, something which is made of two parts. And in the context of Greek religion and their hospitality customs, symbol was a tablet which was broken away in order to have two parts, which were understood as identifying another part, because this unique line of this broken line, this jagged line, was authentic, and it was able. They had a possibility to authenticate the other part as a genuine part, and any part of the symbolic whole may refer to itself as a part, to the other part and to the symbolic whole, this whole tablet as unbroken. So we have two concrete parts and symbolic whole, and any of two parts may refer to itself and to the other part and to the whole. So the symbol is a sign in a usual sense. It refers to something else, but it also a very peculiar structure made of two parts. In a sense, it is a diptych. And so to say, a symbol of symbol is an iceberg. Seeing the upper part, which is above the water, we know that the other part is under the water, and this part which is above the water refers to itself, to the another part which under the water, and to the whole, this piece of ice. And in this sense, we may employ the analogy of symbol as this whole comprised of two parts. As an analogy which may refer to the phenomenon of Čiurlionis' creation. Čiurlionis is some sort of an iceberg. His paintings may be understood in their superficial or surface from the standpoint of their surface. And we know that Čiurlionis used many codes, and he conveyed various symbolic meanings in his paintings and his music, but both his musical works and his paintings are very pleasing to the eye. They are very beautiful to behold without those symbolic meanings. And in this sense, his works, any of his works function as perfect wholes, which do not need anything additional. But we know that Čiurlionis used various codes, and so we have another layer, so to say, underwater layer of any of his works, of paintings, of musical compositions, and so on. In this sense, his way of expression, the way his works function, are very symbolic in this aforementioned sense. Not in the sense that they have some cultural or religious meanings, but in the sense of this duality of what is on the surface and what is below the surface. And this very conjunction of painting and music is also yet another manifestation of this duality, because we may analyze Čiurlionis' paintings in an isolated way, and musical works in an isolated way, as part of his creation, which needs nothing more. It is sufficient in itself. But we can argue that his paintings, besides being paintings, are also a sort of music. He organizes his works according to various musical forms. Very often he uses the sonata form. He organizes the surface of a particular painting according to sonata logic, and in a sequential way he organizes paintings in this sonata order. And this very gentle interplay of shades, of tones, is musical in its own right. So his paintings resonate they sound. We may speak of Čiurlionis' paintings as soundscapes. And on the other hand, his musical compositions also have a visual, a graphic part to it. One of those aspects is the fact that he tried to create a programmatic music, and even those titles express this intention. The sea and in the forest and various other titles show to convey on the acoustic plane, on the level of music, to convey some visual image. And in yet another respect, on the level of Čiurlionis' scores, we may find various very peculiar graphic structures, various schematic structures and symmetries which function apart from actual sounding of those scores. So we have music as it sounds, but on the level of the score we find various graphic configurations. And in this respect we find the painting or the visual element in the realm of the sound, on the level of music. So it is a form of a fractal. If we liken this duality of painting and music as some form of mega symbol, each of its parts in its own right has a fractal structure. This painting part has a musical part inherent in it, and vice versa. It is a very interesting circumstance. And it is also very important to say a few words about the perception of time. As we know, St. Augustine turned our attention to the fact that we have this tripartite structure of temporal sequence. We have the past time, the present time, and the future time or part. And the ability to understand the music is based on the human ability to not only perceive the actual sounding sound, but also the remembering of the sound which has sounded a few moments ago, and to anticipate a few notes ahead. So we include in our presence also the past and the future. And in this sense, the present is ever-present and omnipresent. The present moment dwells in the past and the future and in the present proper. And in this respect, we achieve this very, very unique feeling of standing presence, some sort of eternity, and in this sense, time itself dissolves. And when we listen to Čiurlionis' music and observe his paintings, we feel this very, very peculiar, very uncanny feeling that time ceases to exist, and what we see with our eyes, those pyramids and angels and ziggurats, are strangely familiar. It is a sort of déjà vu. What we see is very peculiar, very strange. At the same time, it is strangely familiar. Somehow, our souls, or whatever we might call it, remember in a Platonic way what we have seen or experienced thousands or millions of years ago. It's a very, very strange feeling. This is on the plane of music, of sound, but also on the plane of color on the plane of visual representations, we encounter the same strategy employed by Čiurlionis. When he represents various buildings, they sometimes appear both as ancient ruins and at the same time as the future cities. A very peculiar understanding of a building. And in one of his paintings, it is one of his earlier paintings, it is named The Morning. We encounter in this painting a strange figure playing with a lyre which is made of goat's skull. A harp or a lyre which is made from a giant skull of a goat. And this figure is a prophetic figure. And the painting is entitled The Morning. So it refers to the future day, to the future, but the figure is a figure from the past. And perhaps it is a prophet. And the etymology of the word prophet is someone who speaks about the future, prophemy in ancient Greek. But this figure is a figure from the past. And this very peculiar circumstance of a figure from the past who prophesies about the future is the representation of syncretization, amalgamation of the past and the future. And in this sense, Čiurlionis produces the same effect as on the plane of music, as on the level of music. He speaks visually about the past, the present, and the future, but he tells various stories about the past, not from historical interest, not in order to tell tales about the past, but in order to achieve this synchronization, this amalgamation of the past, of the present, and the future. The same strategy as in the sphere of music. And there are some other, very briefly, two other points. He was able to amalgamate various universal symbols, such as the symbol of the cross, and Lithuanian native symbols. We have one very important, very interesting painting which is entitled The Vision, and it represents a strange T-shaped cross with a grass snake or a snake or serpent entwined onto it, and it may be interpreted as a Lithuanian, as a Baltic grass snake, but also as a representation of this copper serpent from the Old Testament, from the context of the wandering of the Jews in the desert. So the Jewish and Lithuanian context at the same time, those two contexts amalgamated into one. It is idle to argue whether the symbol is Lithuanian or whether it is universal. Both Lithuanian and both universal. And he is the most Lithuanian painter and musician, and the most universal, universally appealing Lithuanian artist. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Naglis, for very interesting insights.